in which we will state what our position is, we will state what these CLICO policyholders' position is, and we will ask him to give us certain clarification in respect of his offer. The case in the Privy Council remains, it is still alive. We have had no proposal from the Attorney General representing the Cabinet in respect of the payment of legal costs which these people had to pay in order to fight their battle. So therefore, we cannot make a final decision today in respect of exactly what we are going to do until we get the letter from the central bank in which we will be able to get its clarification and it will know what our position is. I want you to know that in the decision which the High Court gave you, the CLICO policyholders, would be entitled to the full sum due on your policy, your full sum due on your policy, which includes whatever the contract said about interest, the full sum due on your policy. It will also include a 3% on that sum, and it will also include 12% from the date the court gave the judgment, 12% interest. And you will also be entitled to costs. If the central bank is giving you monies that it considers to be due to you, and it is not connected with the litigation, you are entitled to collect that money subject to certain clarification and documents being made plain. You're entitled to collect that money on account of the sum due to you, and you can still have your litigation pending in the Privy Council to decide on the balance of that sum. So you would therefore understand why it is important for us to be able to know from the central bank and from the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago exactly what this offer means. Now, it is my view, however, that the central bank should have paid you immediately. If they had to pay you 85%, they should have paid you immediately. They should not wait until 3 months to have to pay you. But I would not want to make that a barrier for you to accept the payment if we get a proper letter from the central bank. I want to be able to know what is the reason. If the government, if the central bank has assets, what is the reason it cannot pay you earlier than the 3 months? I also believe that the central bank ought to say exactly when, a maximum time, and they should say it in writing, a maximum time as to when they're going to pay you the balance of the 15%. Because it cannot just be open, because it could mean that you could wait for 5 years, you could wait for 10 years, the government could decide not to sell methanol again, and you have that hanging in the balance. So I think that we need to get specific time frames from the central bank. I want you to know that policyholders contact me, and I want to share some of the views that they have about the offer. They think the offer is good, but they have some reservations. And they believe, however, that they have to proceed with caution. Why do they have to proceed with caution? Having regard to what happened to them in the past. Because you had a situation where government said, we are going to pay you, and then another government came in and said they're not going to pay you. And they had a situation in which the same government which decided not to pay you, those were the persons in opposition at the time who stood up in the parliament and said the then government was right to guarantee the debt to CLICO. And I just want to remind you that when the previous government made the commitment to pay CLICO policyholders the full sums due under their policy and gave a guarantee to them that whatever happens few months later, when they got into government, the same people voted in the cabinet for another plan. So that's why and everybody seemed to be getting money, and everybody seemed to be getting promises. And we do not know what is going to happen in 3 months' time. And therefore, if we make an agreement, and we bind ourselves, and we do that, and in 3 months' time, after the election, assuming this government gets back in office, and they change their mind, what would be their position? So you are seeing the difficulties, and they say that suppose you have another government, and another government does not agree with what this government does. So the only thing you can say is that the previous administration had taken the position that they will honor the debt and they will pay you. But a new government that comes in, whichever the government is, can take a different position. So I am saying this because I want you and the population to understand that this is not a simple decision for policyholders to make. Because remember, policyholders have been burnt with this. Some of the policyholders who didn't get their monies, remember some of them died. Some of the children couldn't go to school. They had to take out some of the children from school. Some of the pensioners couldn't get their pension. Some of the people who were ill couldn't afford to buy their medicines. They had to do it without medicines. So some of these people are very hurt, and they do not trust the state at this time. And therefore I would want the central bank and I would want the cabinet to understand that they have to level clearly with the people, and they must not say one thing and do something else. So we will be writing the letters, and I would want them to commit themselves in plain language as to what they are going to give to these policyholders. And that document, if it becomes necessary, will be the document that we will use, and if the case has to go on, we'll be able to present it to the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council. I want you to understand that I met in London last week with the other members of the legal team, Mr. Peter Knox, Queen's Counsel, and Mr. Robert Strand, and we discussed at length the central bank statement. And although we take the position that it is an improved position to what the government was saying over the last few years, we believe that there are matters which the central bank will have to give us answers on, and that we intend to prepare a memorandum setting out the arguments that we have to show that the judgment of the Court of Appeal is wrong and the judgment of the High Court is correct, and that the judgment of the High Court will be restored by the Privy Council, which we are going to send both to the Governor of the Central Bank and to the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago for him to show the Cabinet, so that they would understand that this is a case, if it has to be determined, if it has to be litigated, we will be prepared to have it litigated. So I do not want to keep you longer here today than is necessary, but I want to get a sort of consensus from you. Do we agree that until we get our monies in hand, until you get your monies in hand and you are fully satisfied, the appeal in the Privy Council remains? Those of you who say, who vote in yes, put up your hand. Yeah. Do we have any no? No. So the position is that until the CLICO policyholders who are litigants in this case get their full sums of monies which are due under their policies and which have been ordered by the High Court, the case in the Privy Council remains. Right? I want to congratulate you, however, for standing up at a time when it was not easy to stand up. You remember those dark days when everybody was saying that it is the government and you couldn't do anything about it. And I remember the meeting we had in Chaguanas, and when I told you that I am no longer in politics, but I am back as a lawyer, and I'll promise you one thing. I'll promise you that government will have to pay you every cent due under your policy. And you remember what the government tried? Did not only reverse what the previous government said and said, no money for you, and they're giving you a plan to take it, and you have to wait for 20 years to get your money. The government passed a law to prevent you from suing CLICO. They went to the parliament and passed a law to prevent people from filing an action, from going to court. And you remember when that happened, that law is still in force. And you remember when that happened, they say, well, what you could do? And you remember I came to you, I said, that is not enough. I said, we are not suing CLICO. We are suing the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago. We are suing the Prime Minister, Kamla Prasad Bisesa, Rudal Munilal, Rambachan, all of them were in the Cabinet, and that is what we sued. We sued all of them, the Prime Minister and all the members of the Cabinet. And when we went to court, the judge ordered them to pay you. They appealed. And remember, after the decision of the Court of Appeal, with due respect to members of the Court of Appeal, I said that judgment was erroneous. It is bound to be overturned, and it will be overturned. And you know why I say so? I want you to take it and read the judgment. I want you to read the judgment. The government gave a promise. It in the papers, it in writing, it all about in the Hansard, and said, don't take out your money from CLICO. We guarantee you we're going to pay you. And the Court of Appeal held that the judge was wrong to hold that the government gave a promise. That is what the judgment said. Because our case was a judicial review in which we were saying that the government gave a promise, caused you to keep your money in CLICO, and you acted to your detriment, and the government must now compensate you. It is called legitimate expectation of a substantive benefit. And the judge agreed. And let me tell you, since that case has been decided in the High Court, There have been many cases decided in the Commonwealth which has made it quite clear that a government, especially a cabinet, cannot say one thing to the population that is going to honor your debt and then they back on that and leave you in the rain. The court has the power to compel the government to pay that money. And they cannot use inability to pay and etc. as any excuse. So I want you to go home today. Go home today. I want you to put your head on the pillow tonight and rest assured that your money is safe. It may take you 6 months, it may take you 1 year, it may take you 2 years, but your money is safe. And that comes to another point. On the 25th of this month, right here, on Saturday the 25th of this month, right here, at 2 p.m., I have invited a foreign guest to talk to you about an appeal in the Privy Council, which he had, and he's going to discuss with you the Caribbean Court of Justice and the Privy Council. And we are going to have a session here explaining to you the judgment the High Court gave in CLICO and the judgment the Court of Appeal gave in CLICO and decisions of the Privy Council and of the Commonwealth in respect of similar cases. The purpose of that is for you to be informed of what your case is about and for you to see yourself how strong a case you have, so that you and the population would know that your decision and the High Court decision to get your money is the correct decision. So I want you to remember the 25th of this month, Saturday, I want you to come. I'm going to send you an email, and I'm going to send, it's going to be a special guest, a gentleman who was a former Prime Minister of a Caribbean country. He had a case in St. Vincent. And he did not get justice before his own courts. He was Prime Minister for years. And he had to go to London. And when he went to London, the case was reversed. High Court was reversed, Court of Appeal was reversed. And he is going to give you that how in his career as a Prime Minister, he advocated to have a Caribbean Court of Justice. But he's going to tell you it has nothing to do with competence. There is competence in the Caribbean, but he wants to give you certain decisions, show you certain decisions of the courts of appeal of the region and certain decisions of the Privy Council in London. And he wants to show you that if it were not for the Privy Council, some of the decisions in the local courts would have created a reduction in the enjoyment of human and fundamental rights in Trinidad and Tobago. And this is going to be at an opportune time in Trinidad and Tobago, because it has always been the position that the Privy Council in Trinidad should not be abolished until the people make that decision. And the people can only make that decision by a referendum, because I've read on the newspapers this morning that there's going to be a lobby over the next few weeks for the government to agree to abolish appeals to the Privy Council. And I want to tell you that when I was the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago, we took the position, the UNC took the position, that although we will accede to the Caribbean Court of Justice Treaty, that it would not be effected in Trinidad and Tobago until the people vote for it in a referendum. And it had a referendum, it had 2 referenda in the Caribbean on the Caribbean Court of Justice already, and people voted to keep the Privy Council. So I want you to understand. So I want a show of hands. How many people are going to come here to listen to that on the 25th of thing? Put up your hand, because I really want you to come and listen to that. It's very important for you to come and listen to that contribution, because you have to understand yourself what your case is about, what the High Court decided in your favor, why the Court of Appeal reversed it, and you have to understand how a litigant feels. in going to the Privy Council, because there's where you are now. And I want you to understand it is not an easy situation when two courts, the High Court and the Court of Appeal of a country, decides against you and you decide to fight that battle. So in closing, I want to call on the Governor of the Central Bank and the government of Trinidad and Tobago that when they get our letters, they give us clear answers so that the offer which have been made can be clarified. Secondly, we want the Attorney General of Trinidad to know that it is because of the conduct of the government not giving us the information for us to assess whether we could have accepted the offer or not. We had to go to court, and therefore our case was a legitimate case, and we want to get some offer on legal costs because you spent a lot of money in fighting this case, and therefore if the government is going to want to settle this matter, they should make an offer for costs and they should give us clarification on the offer. It is not too late. I want to call upon the government to make an apology to the population and to CLICO policyholders that they caused so much suffering and injustice to people. Some of them have lost their lives when the government knew that there were sufficient assets and potential assets available for policyholders to be paid from the statutory fund. As a matter of fact, we showed the Court of Appeal in Trinidad and Tobago from the documents which the government produced that there was sufficient availability of funds for CLICO policyholders to be paid. And one final statement I want to make. I do not know what I may have to do in the next year or two, but if it's one thing I would like to do, I would like to do something about the fraud and the corruption which has occurred in CLICO. And I believe that this government knows that in denying the CLICO to them, there was misconduct in public office because it was wrong to have to make you go and file a case and go through all of this hell when the government and officials of government would have known that there was sufficient funds available in CLICO to pay. I believe there was a conspiracy to defraud you and to make you suffer an injustice. And that is a serious matter. And I want to promise you today that I am not going to leave it like that. This case is not just a case. This case is not just for money for you. This is a case which has caused a lot of lives to be lost, physically, professionally, and academically. And I have a stake in this. I have a stake in this as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. And I, as Attorney General, got up and I stood up for policyholders to be told the truth when I was Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago. And I know some of the facts. And therefore, this government has to tell, and I would ask them to tell the truth before it is too late. This government knows that there was sufficient money, sufficient assets to pay you, and they allowed policyholders to take less money than what was due to them. My brothers and sisters, I have had conversations with credit unions in this country in which people save their little sums and put it in the credit union. And credit unions were made to take millions of dollars less than what was due to them. Millions of dollars less. As a matter of fact, most of the credit unions in Trinidad and Tobago were forced, acted under duress to take millions of dollars less. 2 credit unions who did not. And I was visited by the officials of those 2 credit unions who came to me, and they saw me on Friday. And we filed a case for we filed a case for one of those credit unions. And that credit union, those officials said, Mr. Maharaj, thank you very much that you saw our point. And they were asked to take about $15 million less. $15 million of poor people money. Think about how many $1 million of poor people money were taken by this government. If the government, the previous government, when there was a collapse of CLICO, did not consider that there was sufficient assets to pay CLICO policyholders, in spite of the collapse, it would not have told the country, I guarantee you the payment of your monies. Keep your money in CLICO. So my brothers and sisters, why? Why would parliamentarians who about 6 months before got up in the parliament and say that is the right thing, we have to do that, and when you get into government, you come up with a Dukuran plan. We want you to get your money in 20 years, and then come up with an enhancement plan. And now come with another plan, but they call it an offer. James Bond plan. Well, I was saying today, we're not taking cat and bag, but I'm frightened to talk about cat these days. We are not taking cat and bag. Cannot. So I congratulate you. You are vindicated today, and I am very happy and privileged, and I feel honored to be part of this struggle with you. Thank you very much, and may God bless you.
No, we met in London. I met in London with the other lawyers, and we are in the process of drafting it. We hope to send a letter within the next 7 or 8 days.
Within the next 7 or 8 days?
Yeah.
Do we have an expected time for the governor to respond? Or?
We'll give them about 10 days because there is no urgency in the matter, because the central bank said it wouldn't be ready in any event to pay out the monies until about within 3 months. But we do not want the process in the Privy Council to stop in any way, so we are continuing that process. Definite date of hearing has been fixed in January 2016, and there's a lot of paperwork to be done, so we are continuing that process.
Okay, allow me to shift a little bit.
Sure. I suspected that.
So it has just been found that the fees are actually higher coming from the Attorney General's office. What do you think about this?
Well, I spoke to Mr. John Jeremy last night about it. I came back from abroad just 2 days ago, and when I saw it, I spoke to him, and we have agreed that the joint letter that we were supposed to send, we are amending that letter. But this makes the position worse. This increased fees makes the position worse, and it makes it more important for there to be a forensic investigation, and for the Commissioner of Police to start an investigation. And we intend to ask the Commissioner to do that. We are going to make ourselves available to the Commissioner or anybody he designates to talk to us. Between Mr. Jeremy and myself, we have a lot of years' experience as Attorney General. We had to deal with the payment of foreign counsel and private lawyers, and on the face of those fees, they are exorbitant. It's unrealistic. And when we were Attorney General, We also had a lot of investigations to be done. As a matter of fact, during my tenure as Attorney General, I had all the money laundering, the confiscation of assets, the Dolce prosecution. We took the Dolce property for the benefit of the state. So we had major litigation in Trinidad and Tobago. And it was that kind of money at all.
You did write a letter before asking for a forensic investigation to be done also?
No. Remember when we called a press conference the other day, just before I went away, we had indicated that we were writing a letter, but we called publicly for forensic investigation and police investigation. That letter was drafted. It was sent to me in London, and I signed it. But then we had this new information coming out. So we decided that we are not going to, we're going to send a redrafted letter, which would be sent within the next 2 days. And we will make a copy, well, I would hope that a copy is made available to the media.
Okay, Mr. Maharaj, come back to the CLICO, the function this morning, right? You said the central bank sent a letter to the policyholders indicating that they'll be buying out their policies.
No, the central bank didn't send I am not aware that the central bank sent a letter. I was dealing with the statement the governor of the central bank made, and which he said that this is the offer that he's making, and I understand that when they're paying the 85%, the people will have to surrender the policy to the central bank.
So the 85% that means they're going to pay to all policyholders?
No, they're paying all EFPA policyholders who did not take the offer, which would include the policyholders we are paying for and who have the case before the Privy Council. They are paying them 85% within 3 months of the contractual price on the policy. And the contractual price on the policy would be the full sums due at the fixed date plus 3 or 4% interest. Okay? What we are saying that our policyholders, we want to have clarification because we want to know whether they're paying the interest and from what date they're paying the interest. And we also want to know what is the central bank's view on the decision of the High Court, which says that in addition to the contractual price on the policy and the 3% interest, we have to get 15% on the sum of the policy that is due from the date of the judgment of the High Court in 2013 and continuing until it is paid.
Right, okay.
And also, we have not got an offer for costs from the Attorney General. So we want to know what are they doing with respect of costs. Because in respect of costs, we are preparing a memorandum showing the strength of the appeal in the Privy Council to restore the judgment of the High Court. And we are saying in any event that they have caused us to file the cases to go to court. So they have to pay the costs. So what in effect we are saying is that the litigation in the Privy Council is not going to be withdrawn until the policyholders who are covered by the action are totally satisfied that they got the full sums due to them.
You did mention though that you weren't going to leave this pair, that in between the next year or two you plan to do something, seeing that the government had the realization that they couldn't pay the policyholders. Is that you plan to sue the government again?
Not sue, but I think there is need for criminal action to be taken in respect of the inaction of the government to ensure that CLICO policyholders were paid when all the facts are showing that at the time when the partnership government offered the reduced payment, there was sufficient assets available for CLICO policyholders to be paid. And the fact that the governor of the central bank has said now that there are sufficient assets when there are no additional assets given. And we have been asking for the last 5 years of the government to supply us the information to justify your action that CLICO does not have sufficient assets. So we have been saying at all times that there was no need to pay CLICO policyholders less monies. No need to pay them percentage, no need for the government to basically confiscate part of CLICO policyholders' money. You had sufficient assets. And the question arises, why on the eve of an election, you come up suddenly and you were saying that you had sufficient assets, when we knew that you had sufficient assets. So what I am saying is that I cannot leave this like that. I intend to use whatever legal skills I have, whatever knowledge I have, in order to see whether criminal action cannot be investigated and, if necessary, brought against individuals who may have been involved in a conspiracy to defraud the CLICO policy.
I got one question. I came out late and I wasn't paying attention to the Gaston interview just now, right? My question is humbly said. Can this problem be rectified before the general election? And if it doesn't, what is the next step for the police? We have to go through another process, another 5 years, or are you going to abandon this?
Oh, no. The case in the Privy Council will be heard in January. So whatever happens in January 2016, the Privy Council will decide, unless this matter is properly settled, whether the High Court decision was right or wrong. And if the High Court decision is right, as I'm saying it is right, the government, the cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago, whichever is the cabinet, will have to pay our CLICO policy holders the full sums of money due on their policy, 3% interest plus 15% interest plus 12% interest from the date of the judgment in 2013.
But if there's a turn in the election and no money in the treasury, would there be a...
And no money in the treasury is no excuse for a government not paying a judgment of the court. There are actions that individuals can take against the assets of the state if the government does not pay the judgment. So that this case, if it has to be proceeded with, our CLICO policy holders will get the monies due to them.
For curiosity's sake, and I speak with President Lehman's question, was the authority lies to the shareholders if they don't have the money to repossess anything of the state, destruction perhaps?
Well, if you get a judgment against the cabinet, against the state, you can levy against the state. There's a process to be done, and you can levy against the state. The daughter of Eric Gary in Grenada was getting trouble with the government of Grenada to pay the monies, and she threatened that, and they paid the monies right away. Recently, the government of St. Vincent decided to pay some monies right away because they were being threatened to levy. There's a process.
The process might take another 5 years.
No, that process won't take 5 years. That process won't take 5 years.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Decision to remove or abolish the Privy Council is not a decision of governments alone, or of judges, of chief justices. It is a decision for the people to make. Justice affects people, and people must have confidence in justice. It has nothing to do with the competence of courts. It has to do with justice. And therefore, the government of Trinidad and Tobago and all governments in the region would have to go to the people by a referendum for it to be decided whether to abolish the Privy Council.
What is your own personal feeling about which one should be the last constitution?
Well, at this time, I believe that the Privy Council ought to remain in Trinidad and Tobago. And I believe that it ought to remain for a certain period of time. And there should be a process whereby appeals from the Caribbean Court of Justice should go to the Privy Council for a period of time. And then when confidence is built in the justice system by the population of the various regions, by the various countries, then you can consider abolition of appeals to the Privy Council. But I say that on the basis that it has nothing to do with competence. It has to do with the decided cases in the region. And the decided cases in the region would show, and when we examine them, when we start examining them in this country, would show how some of these cases are decided and whether they are decided with giving full length and breadth to the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago and the principles of public law. So it is difficult to answer that question without, educating the population. And what I plan to do from the 25th, there'll be a public education program on issues like the Privy Council. And there'll be other issues. There'll be other issues like, for example, I won't want to give an opinion now, but as to whether the cabinet should have a member of parliament who behaved in the way of Ms. Topley.
Hold on, good Lord, everybody let me sing.